I will share in this lecture first what I understand about Chopin's intentions of writing this Grande Polonaise Brillante at the age of early 20s. From years of analyzing and performing his music, I will also share what is Chopin's distinct style that can be specifically found here in this youthful piece. The aim of understanding Chopin's intentions and getting familiar with his distinct style is to be as Chopin as possible when performing this piece. One very good source of information in finding out Chopin's intentions is its title. Chopin peculiarly picked the title to reflect the inspirations he had. This is a grand, brilliant Polonaise preceded by an Andante Spianato. Let us start with the first word. The word grand here possibly implies the stately characteristics in which the music flows and the vast horizons in which the music soars. Historically, this grand manner represents well the heart of the Romanticisms. Beethoven was the first composer who was fond of using the term. For example, his Grand Piano Opus 7, that happens to be in his grand tonality, E flat major. Its second movement also carries the indications of con grande espressione. Here are the scores of Beethoven Opus 7, the grand first movement and the grand expressions of the second movement. Also to bring along into considerations with this word grand is the fact that the concerts before a large crowd started to take place since the beginning of the 19th century. And the word brilliant or brilliant implies the virtuosic qualities this piece was intended to be. Virtuosity was one of the main features of the Romantic era, as the instrument piano was undergoing numerous rapid mechanical improvements. This Polonaise was originally written around 1830 for piano and orchestra, which means the piano part will offer a brilliant display of virtuosity. Shortly before Chopin started writing this Opus 22, he just successfully published his Opus 3, Introductions and Polonaise Brillante for cello and piano. This is a work of similar brilliant display of virtuosity, actually more for its piano part. Therefore, this Opus 22 is historically the second Polonaise with the Opus number and also the first Polonaise for solo piano, arranged by the composers as he added the Andante Spianato opening and published it as his Opus 22 in 1836. Now to the main part of the title, Polonaise, that is Poland's national dance. Here are some facts on the word Polonaise. First, in French, the language of the original title, Polonaise, means Polish. Chopin was living in Paris at the time he wrote this piece around 1801. Polonaise was already quite common in classical music, long before Chopin wrote Polonaises. Not as common as minuet, but Polonaise already existed at least since the Baroque era. Bach wrote few Polonaises. Here are a few examples of Polonaises from Bach, such as the fifth movement from his last English suite. Originally, this was a Polish folk dance, but it became a favorable dance for the aristocrats and widely spread throughout the European continent in the 17th century. It is a processional dance with a distinct rhythmic pattern. It is always in 3/4 with its distinguished to semiquaver rhythmic pattern. Often composer would write alla polacca, which means in the style and character of a Polonaise. Here is an example from the third movement of Beethoven's Triple Concerto, Rondo alla polacca. After some general ideas on what a Polonaise is, let us move closer to Chopin's Polonaises. In comparing Chopin's Polonaises to his mazurkas, I may conclude that Polonaise is Chopin's best expressions of his national pride and identity, while mazurka is Chopin's best expressions of his intimate feeling toward the culture and the rural life of his homeland. My colleague Dr. Christine Utomo in her lectures tonight will go deeper into comparing Chopin's Polonaises and mazurkas. In general, the pacing of harmonic progressions in Chopin's Polonaises is broader and less chromatic, less unpredictable than in his mazurkas, due to the stately natures of the dance. The adjective grand at the title might be redundant as it is already implied in the stately nature of the Polonaise. After this Opus 22, Chopin never added the words grand nor brilliant to his Polonaises. But there is more than just a personal homage to his native land. It was the heroisms through music that Chopin had contributed as Poland was under Russian occupations at that time. And this Opus 22 was written around the time of the 1830 uprising in Poland. Chopin's first ballad, Opus 23, was also written about the same time. Chopin had written many posthumous Polonaises during his teenage years. This Opus 22 Polonaise is the only Polonaise with the title word grand, which most likely is to distinguish this Polonaise from his previous ones. But because this Opus 22 Polonaise was written during the November 1830 uprising in Poland, It is also possible that Chopin, as an exile in Paris, had the intentions to loudly proclaim from the concert stages what a great and brave nation his motherland was. Surely this could be one valid interpretation of this piece. This Opus 22 Polonaise and the Opus 23 Ballade make a nice pair. The Opus 22 is a proud proclamation to the world, while the Opus 23 is a personal, desperate lamentation. The Opus 22 ends in a glorious triad hurling up and down, while the Opus 23 ends in crashing chromatic octaves. Note here the Picardian major chords ending for the ballad. So much we could learn from just the title, which will navigate our interpretations, our choices of executions in performing this piece. And now we will go to the second part of my lecture. Flourishing individual styles were an important aspect of the Romantic period, and Chopin, like other composers of the Romantic period, established his own writing style. More than a year ago, I have discussed about the Chopin's piano writing style when analyzing his fourth ballade. I provided the link on the descriptions below if you would like to hear that. In that lecture, I discussed all of these 5 features with examples on different pieces performed by my students. In this lecture, I am going to show these 5 distinct features of Chopin's piano writing style in this Opus 22 Grande Polonaise Brillante. In most passages, these 5 features take place simultaneously. These features are reflecting who Chopin was. There are his personalities imprinted in his music. The more familiar we are with these qualities, the more Chopin our interpretations will become. Let's start with the first one. Composers like Liszt, Debussy, and few others demand piano to imitate the sounds of other instruments, such as flute, horn, harp, or trumpet. They may also demand piano to represent the sound of rippling water, or the waves, or wind, storms, thunders, etc. But not Chopin, who wrote his music almost exclusively for piano. He demands piano to sound like piano. With any Chopin's piano work, piano is to sound the best, the richest the instrument could offer. The beauty of its ringing tones, shimmering articulations, melting sound of legato, and good pedaling, etc. And there is no better way to familiarize ourselves with Chopin's pianistic natures than dwelling in his etudes. And we could find that Chopin's etudes are an amazing vocabulary of numerous pianisms. Each Chopin etudes is not a mere exercise on a particular technique. It is also a training on a particular pianistic quality. And we can explore and find many pianistic qualities through his etudes for the rest of his piano works. Take a look at this one-page example, and we will find many pianistic qualities that are already introduced in his earlier Opus 10 etudes and the upcoming Opus 25 etudes. The lightness, dreamlike flow in the Opus 10 number 2 or Opus 25 number 2. Let's hear how this sounds. The playful, light, swift touch like that in the Opus 10 number 7 or the number 11, the arpeggio etudes, or the Opus 25 number 8, the 6th, or the Opus 25 number 9, the butterfly. Similar playful with the grace note touch like that in the Opus 25 number 5. Let's hear the pianistic playfulness here. Next quality is this brilliant, sparkling touch like that in the Opus 10 number 4 or number 5 or number 8. Or in the next passage shown here, the Lord's brilliant sweep like that in the Opus 10 number 1 or the Ocean's Opus 25 number 12. And let's hear this brilliant quality now. And the last one from this page, the powerful octaves, unison, like that in Opus 25 number 10. And now I will play the entire page here so that you may hear the richness of Chopin's pianistic nature. These examples are just to mention a very few. What I will do next is to pick up a few passages from this Opus 22 Polonaise to show the other features of Chopin's piano writing style. There are many things can be discussed from this piece, but I will limit the scope of these lectures by only focusing on the rhythmic aspect. This alone has plenty to discuss on how Chopin plays with the rhythm. This play with the rhythm is a big part in his improvisatory nature, in his lyrical nature, in his dancing nature, and so crucial for his narrative and poetic natures that distinguishes him from the other composers. Let us go to Chopin's music to see how this playing with the rhythm or timing. The florid accompaniment is very typical of Chopin's piano music, but there is something more here. Its fluidity is resulted from the asymmetrical constructions. The highest note or the turning point of the accompaniment is located off the center. Because of that, it can be seen as a hemiola construction. 6/8 itself is already a flexible meter to begin with, and a large portion of Chopin music is written in triple meter. And with such a hemiola construction, it adds the fluidity of this 6/8 meter. It creates such a floating feeling, slightly off the ground from the standard pulses. This rhythmic play at the accompaniment provides the opportunity for the melodic line to sound strongly declamatory by having a clear rhythmic organization in 6/8. The accompaniment helps the melody line to be strongly rhythmical but not stiff. There is one more amazing thing to discover here. It is interesting to see how Chopin connects his opening Andante Spianato to the Polonaise. Observe these three repeated notes on G. It creates the rhythmic pattern short, short, long. It is amazing to me to realize that in this seemingly tender accompaniment lies the spirit of the Polonaise. Especially amazing if I relate this piece to the circumstance that happened at that time, as if Chopin in this piece was musically expressing the peace-loving yet strong spirit of his fellow countrymen who were at that time fighting the battle for independence. And here is the Polonaise with its peculiar rhythmic pattern. And we can see here the connections rhythmic-wise. We may look at these connections note-wise too, the repeated notes of G in the accompaniment, and how proudful that first note G of the melody, and the fanfare on G. Here is the fanfare on G, bridging the Andante Spianato opening to the actual Polonaise. The common note between G majors of the Andante Spianato and the E flat major Polonaise is G. Whether Chopin consciously or unconsciously did this, it is indeed an amazing connection to realize. One more thing about the connections between the two sections. Observe the opening melodic line. That is from the third scale degree dropping to the fifth scale degree, a drop of the interval sixth. And we may say here that in the Polonaise, those notes between G and B flat, here in the yellow area, are all passing notes as an elaborations or improvisations. Observe now how playful Chopin was to add the lower note in the green, the playful non-harmonic tone A at the downbeat, a stronger beat, while giving accents to the true note, which is shifted now to the weaker beat, creating a nice accented syncopation. Just from this one example, how abundant musical happenings we could find if we spend time to explore them. We see Chopin's improvisatory nature in connecting all segments of this piece. We see Chopin's lyrical nature. The melody alone, if we analyze, is just a drop down sixth, then rising scale-wise, and then skip one step to the highest. The interesting thing is how Chopin provided the accompaniment that will let the melody to rise high and shine beautifully. And when we see this lyrical opening, we must not miss to incorporate the dancing nature. We may see the rhythm of a jig or a bar carol in the melody, while having the hidden Polonaise within the accompaniment as I mentioned earlier. So much of the dancing soul in Chopin's music And now to the storytelling and poetic qualities in Chopin music that I would like to elaborate a little bit. How reading a story or poetry differs from reading a report. In reading a report, we try our best to avoid any possibility of having multiple interpretations. On the contrary, poetry often uses symbolisms that brings the possibility of having multiple interpretations. In reading poetry, we enjoy the journey of understanding, and even though it is not the fastest route, it could possibly be more powerful at times. One of the important elements of the storytelling or poetry reading is placing the emphasis on particular words by playing with the timing. The same is true in music, and let us see an example of this emphasis in music. The way a composer indicates an emphasis is by writing the marking for accentuations. Even though one way of manifesting this emphasis is by giving a bigger volume of sound, it is not the only way. Hey, listen. I just whispered quietly, but I am giving an emphasis in my tone by playing with the timing of my speaking. Many musicians, especially the inexperienced one, only think accentuations as playing big. So here with an accents from Chopin, first of all, let us differentiate between the accent marking and the sforzando marking. The sforzando marking does require a powerful, big tone or a sudden force in the flow. The accents marking may or may not come with big force. Accentuations could be done by both big or small volume, but one element must always be there, that is timing. We play with the timing in giving the emphasis. To be specific or practically, we give extra preparation time before the note. We delay the note as if saying this is important. Here is an example, and there is a reason for this accentuations mark. After moving stepwise up, it lifts a third from C to E. It is like stretching a rubber further. It creates higher tensions to the highest note. Chopin added the tensions by writing the diminished chord beneath. Besides those special places marked by Chopin, equally important are those unmarked places. This is more than just being musical or being expressive. For example, I feel the drive to give extra time on the octave drop of the melody. Here it is at the green arrow. Why? First, it is the beginning of a recurring phrase. But more than that, it is also a higher drop compared to the beginning. We have the interval of 6 in the beginning, now an octave here. Now I will show you another example. When the melody comes again, Chopin wrote a higher lip to F sharps instead of just to E. It should give an extra tension here. Even though Chopin wrote staccato followed by a quick crest, which is very typical in his music. To close my lecture, let me play this opening. I hope this short lecture somehow help your musical journey.